In this video, I'm going to talk about why I have Lomachenko ranked as a Hall of Famer over Errol Spence Jr., who I'm not sure is a Hall of Famer. This is a question that was brought up to me by boom! See it on the camera, or maybe it'll pop up just like this. So it's a interactive comment. Episode sponsored by Dr. Pedro Nava, one of the first subscribers to the channel. We appreciate your support, Dr. Pedro Nava. Let's get into a real average video, and as always, let's watch the groovy intro. So, Vasily Lomachenko, to me, is a no-doubt Hall of Famer, yet he has 3 losses. I believe his record is 17-3. I'm going to look over at my very, very articulate newsroom desk, so I don't say unsubstantiated truths in this video. I want to be as honest as possible in this video. And yes, Lomachenko has 3 losses, but he's a 2-time Olympic gold medalist. Spence isn't a Olympic gold medalist, so that alone, I know maybe some people only look at pro achievement, but coming from the amateurs, only losing 1 amateur fight, 2-time gold medalist versus a fighter who didn't win in the Olympics. Add to it that Lomachenko, in his very second fight, fought for the WBO featherweight title against Orlando Salido. He didn't win, but that's also a fight where people don't really remember history right. Lomachenko was very close to stopping Salido in that fight in the last round. Lomachenko also got hit with a lot of low blows in that fight, and Salido blew the weight class and came in much heavier to be the physically bigger guy in the fight. Lomachenko went to his 3rd professional fight, 1-1, and faced Gary Russell Jr. for a title. People could go, oh, Gary Russell hadn't fought much opposition, whatever. Gary Russell, formidable, highly touted prospect. Lomachenko won that fight, and what Lomachenko displayed in this, and shout out to Eddie Croft, a fantastic coach from B Street Boxing, one of the best in the world. What Lomachenko did in that fight was he displayed a lot of foot speed and foot feints. The upper body was very similar, but Lomachenko's lower body movement was what separated in that fight. So that's within his first 3 fights. Now, if you were to compare that to Errol Spence actually turned pro before Vasily Lomachenko, and he fought Jonathan Garcia, Richard Andrews, and Nathan Butcher. So just off the premise alone of the first 3 fights that they had, they were moved in starkly different ways. Spence was built up to be a star. Lomachenko had an approach of, I want to fight the best opposition as quick as possible. I'm not beating around the bush. Put me in the biggest fights. So Lomachenko wins those 3 fights. I'm looking to see what else happened at featherweight. I mean, within a very short period of time, he couldn't compete at featherweight. And it wasn't even about could he make the weight. It was Lomachenko might be the best featherweight we've ever seen in the history of boxing. He was so dominant, we basically demanded he move up in weight, and he moved up in weight because he got bored, it seemed, and fans were uninterested in the matchups because he was just that friggin' dominant. It's kind of what we're seeing with Inoue at probably like 118 and 122. We just assume Inoue is going to win. We don't even research the fights. Lomachenko was that good, moves up to 130. At 130, he beats Nicholas Walters, who had just made Nonito Donaire quit. He beats Jason Sosa, a tough guy of the era, underrated guy of the era. Miguel Mariaga, a very tough journey guy in that era. And Guillermo Regendiao, another multiple-time gold medalist, Olympian, one of the best amateur boxers ever. What we learned was Regendiao didn't really know how to fight on the inside. That's what happened. That's the streak of Lomachenko, where all the guys quit. We go through that. Then he becomes a 3-division world champion, does it in the fastest time ever for a male athlete, the fastest man to become a 3-division world champion. I believe it was in 12 fights, if I'm looking at my notes right. Beats Jorge Linares. Crackerjack of a fight. If you never saw that in 2018, really, really good fight. And that was a fight that was treated like a pay-per-view without being a pay-per-view. And then the issue for Lomachenko was, where is my big fight? And then this is where Lomachenko's career kind of hit the rails is his modern big fights against the fighters people care about, he loses. He lost a close fight to Teofimo Lopez that the world thought that he wasn't going to lose. And then after losing that fight to Teofimo Lopez, his next really relevant fight was against Devin Haney. Loses that fight. And that was a fight that I was recently on a Twitter space with Writing Yogi, a great human being. And I think that was a fight where both fighters left that fight being disappointed. Lomachenko, I think, is disappointed because the size of Haney did affect him. And I think that there were times that he was a bit tentative and took off the last round and probably kicking himself. And I felt like Devin Haney didn't use his size enough to be as effective as he quite possibly could have. It's the classic fight where I think both guys left the ring thinking that they won the fight, but both guys probably left the ring frustrated about their performance. Some people look at the Jermaine Ortiz fight and go, oh man, Lomachenko probably shouldn't have won that. That was the classic winning a close, tough fight against an underrated fighter. To me, 3-division world champion, doing a lot of historic feats such as winning a world title in 3 fights, becoming a 3-division world champion in 12 bouts. These are things that get you into the Hall of Fame because they require a lot of risk. There's a lot of risk involved. Now, when we go over to Errol Spence's career, it's a completely different type of career. So his first meaningful fight is his 16th fight. He takes on Sammy Vargas from Canada. Good veteran, follows it up against another Canadian, Phil LaGreco. 18th fight, Chris Van Heerden. But like the Van Heerden fight and his 20th fight against Chris Algieri, both of those fights, the fighters were not in good headspace. Chris Van Heerden had told us in an interview he had fired his previous manager, kicked him out of the locker room, not in a good headspace when he fights Spence. And then Algieri was going through a lawsuit with a promoter heading into the Errol Spence fight. Doesn't seem like he's that same guy. Spence does the classic thing, fights Leonard Bundu. Bundu had gone 12 rounds with Keith Thurman. He wants to fight Thurman. Stops Bundu. Okay, we got something. Goes overseas, beats Kell Brook, yet still there's another asterisk to this one. And it's not even Errol Spence's fault. It's just the way it shook out. And it's a little bit of the matchmaking rubric that was used to build Spence. Brook had just fought Gennady Golovkin and gotten a damaged eye. Fights Errol Spence Jr. and the eye revs up. The other eye gets bludgeoned and beaten, and the fight has to get stopped. Now Spence is a world champion. From there, we get some mandatories. He beats Lamont Peterson, so forth, so on. The big 2 fights of his career, Mikey Garcia. He moves up from the lower weights, fights Errol Spence Jr. Good win, very good win. Mikey, after that fight, we never saw the same Mikey Garcia again, but a solid performance. Sean Porter was able to drop Sean, really close fight, showed that he could win a tough, hard fight. Guys that aren't kind of, as you say, the truth, don't win those fights. Danny Garcia win, I mean, that's a good fight. I can't really think of a world-class Danny Garcia win at welterweight, so it's not like the most impressive, but Danny was a great fighter of his era. And then the Ugas win, it's a shame for Spence that wasn't the Pacquiao name because Ugas beat Pacquiao, but Ugas's name is never going to hold the credibility. The issue with Spence's career is it's not unlike Chad Dawson. Chad Dawson and Errol, and I apologize for anyone that started watching when Manny Pacquiao and Floyd Mayweather fought because, Chad Dawson probably doesn't mean anything to you. But for those that didn't and know Chad Dawson is, Chad was the man in his division. But if you look at Chad's resume, there's some names there, but you can pick apart the names just like how we can pick apart Spence's. The problem is when Chad got into his career defining fights against Andre Ward and Adonis Stevenson, he lost him, and he kind of lost him really, really bad. So all the work and all the dominance he had prior to that, it kind of gets hurt. And now it just comes into the relationship and the nostalgia of the viewer, of the fight critic, of the voter for the International Boxing Hall of Fame. Is Chad Dawson a Hall of Famer? It just comes down to your relationship with the fighter. That's what's going to come down to Errol Spence. Errol Spence holds 1 world title, or he holds 3 world titles, but in 1 division, in the welterweight division. He didn't go to 54. He's not a multi-division world champion. He fought in each division. He pursued the Crawford fight, and when he fought Crawford, he got grossly outclassed. And I think that's also where him and Lomachenko differ to me. Lomachenko has not been outclassed the way Spence was outclassed by Crawford. Lomachenko has lost competitive close fights. Spence looked tactically confused against Crawford. He looked as though his strategy was be physically tough, be bigger, and overwhelm Crawford. And when that didn't work, we heard his coach, Derek James, say, step over. Well, I mean, it looked as though there was a disconnect with that unit just during that. And it's hard, right? Because you're getting hit really hard and all that stuff. But this is my video in response to why I see Vasily Lomachenko being a Hall of Famer and Errol Spence now having to do more stuff to be a Hall of Famer. Because boxing is not charity. If you're going to be a Hall of Fame boxer, you kind of have to be like one of these all-time great people. There are consequences to losing big fights. Does it mean that Errol's not a great fighter? No. Does this mean that we shouldn't get great fights like this? No. I think the only thing it tells us is we need fights like Crawford and Spence to happen even earlier in fighters' careers. So if you do lose the way Spence lost, well, you have time to kind of rebuild, because you look at great fighters like Tommy Hearns. Hearns lost some fights, but guess what? He still was able to create a Hall of Fame career because he fought enough guys and he won some and he lost some. Spence is going to have to win a fight on the back end, or at least make that last performance look different in order to be a Hall of Famer. To me, I'm probably never going to have a Hall of Fame vote. So does my opinion, some YouTube guy, matter? Not really. It really doesn't matter. What do y'all think in the comments? You tell me. Are Lomachenko and Spence both Hall of Famers? Is only one of them? Is none of them? Is Spence the Hall of Famer and Loma not the Hall of Famer? You tell me. Get interactive. Let's name call and all that stuff. Let's get really, really disrespectful and raise our voices and yell at each other. That would be super fun. And while we're doing that, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Hit the thumbs up button. And I'll see you in the next video.